The first time I saw a pistol pointed at me on a suburban street, I thought stupidly that it was some kind of prank gone wrong, until the man with the clipboard stepped forward and smiled like he'd been handed the keys to my life. He said, "You don't belong here," like it was a civic duty, and the barrel didn't argue. That's how the night started. Him on a jog, shoes still smelling like the trail, sun folding into the trees, and a neighborhood I thought I knew turning its back slow as a tide. My name's Eli Mercer. I grew up 2 blocks from the blue mailbox on Harrow Lane, my family's farmhouse patch that nobody thought mattered until it did. I'd been away for 4 years' work, the sort of job that picks you up and drops you where it needs you. So when I rolled back into town, I expected the same porch lights and Mrs. Lau's lemon tree and the kids on bikes. What I didn't expect was a string of tiny cottages, weirdly neat, squeezed into the scrub at the edge of my property like teeth someone had filed down to fit a grin. They had for rent signs, solar panels, a little HOA plaque where our old boundary marker used to be. That's the short version. They built, they rented, they pocketed the checks while I was gone. The long version is the part where people explain how rules matter more than roots. On that first evening, I was just trying to clear my head footfall rhythm, breath when Howard Pike stepped into the road. Howard is the kind of man who wears importance the way other people wear cologne. Obvious, heavy-handed, and faintly offensive. He'd been the HOA president for as long as anyone could remember, and when an organization becomes a person's identity, that person tends to get creative. "You can't be on this street after dusk," he said, as if he were reading from a handbook for people he'd already decided were wrong. I laughed because what else do you do when a neighbor makes a ridiculous demand and that didn't sit well with him? He stepped closer, clipboard in hand, and that's when his smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. "You need to leave. Now." I told him my parents were 2 houses down, that I lived here. I told him I'd grown up here. He tilted his head, the way dogs do when they don't understand a command, and he said, "Not anymore." It was a sentence wrapped in other sentences, easements, covenants, new boundaries that had appeared like mushrooms overnight. I asked him where he'd gotten the right to decide that. He said, "We did what had to be done." That's how the next minute went. Him talking about community standards, me talking about ancestral deeds, and a survey map from 1978, both of us hearing the other through the thickness of our own certainties. Then, in a move that went adrenaline slow before I could react, he stepped back, and someone behind him muttered something about registering an official complaint, and the pistol was in his palm. He hadn't pulled it out like a show-off, more like a man with a plan bringing the plan into focus. Fear is an odd thing. It doesn't always feel like the movies. Sometimes it's just a ping, a bright little bell of alarm in the back of your head, but then your body decides to translate that bell into biology. Heart tempos, the way your throat goes dry even though your mouth is suddenly wetter. I didn't lunge. I didn't raise my hands. I did what my mother taught me: when tempers flare, speak like you mean calm, not confrontation. "Howard," I said, slow and even, "put that down." He laughed then, a thin sound that tried to be derisive and landed as nervous. "You gonna make me, Mercer? This is how we keep order." He said, order, like it was an altar he expected others to kneel at. And that's when the crowd showed up. Not a crowd really, porch lights flicking on, phones coming out, people whispering as if the night itself had become gossip. Some faces I knew, some I didn't. The renters in the cottages peered through curtains. Mr. Alvarez from across the street stood at his mailbox like the world had become a stage, and he didn't want to miss the act. Nobody moved forward. Nobody shouted for him to drop it. Nobody told him to stop wearing authority like armor. What settled on me then was less the threat of the gun and more the shape of the silence around it. Howard felt his power swell, mistook stillness for consent. So I did the unlovely thing of exposing it. "You built on my land," I said. "You signed checks for cottages on my property." He blinked like that was a novelty he hadn't cataloged. "We acted under community license," he said. Translation: we reinterpreted a map. We changed a title in someone's back office. We convinced enough people that these changes were for the greater good. For him, the greater good was a tidy ledger and the sensation of control. Then I heard a car, 2 tires on gravel, siren sound threaded through alternating horns, the small human music of someone calling for help. It was George, who runs the hardware store, calling the police. That sound made Howard flinch. For the first time, the gun's shine looked too bright for him. He raised it anyway, as if to say I could still do it if I wanted to. You don't have to do this, I said. Maybe it was the veteran in me. Maybe it was the stubbornness of someone who knows his address and his rights. Maybe it was just the wrong mixture of fury and tiredness. Put the gun down, Howard. Walk away. He looked at me like a man might look at a mirror just seeing the reflection for the first time. Wary, unsure, irritated. You think you can come back and take everything? He asked. You think you can just show up and make a claim? I did think I could show up. I did think the law was on my side. Documents do matter, but what I also learned standing on that stretch of asphalt was that legality and morality are two different scaffolds. You can have a piece of paper that says a thing is yours and still find your world irrevocably shifted because other people decided their convenience was worth more than your inheritance. He lowered the gun a fraction, enough to make me think he might be listening to the sound of the approaching patrol car. Someone shouted from a porch, "Howard, you can't." And then the world narrowed to the exchange of breath between us. His panic and my steady refusal to let it consume me. When the officers arrived, there was a choreography to it commands, a heap of uniforms, flashlights making the cottages look like shard-strewn stage props. Howard folded like a man who'd believed his own rhetoric too long. Resignation, then anger, then a small, bitter plea. They started this, he said to the officers, as if a transfer of blame could be an alibi. They cuffed him. They read him rights. They walked him back past the cottages where lights clicked off like someone erasing a story. People were quiet. Some cried. Some made excuses. Some kept their heads down. Later, in a church basement meeting room, a dozen of us would sit facing each other and unpack the why of it. The HOA's overreach, the way money had got threaded into every decision, the leases signed in back rooms, the silent nods of neighbors who'd rather not stir trouble. If there's a center to this, it's in the little betrayals how small tolerances become big injustices. The HOA had found loopholes and people found reasons to look away. Because renters meant quick cash. Because the board promised beautification. Because saying no to a man like Howard required more courage than most of us felt we had. He protected our values, someone said that night, half stunned, half apologetic, and you could tell the apology was for the hearing, not the doing. I don't tell this story to make anyone feel guilty. Well, not only that. I tell it because there's a muscle we forget to exercise until someone points a gun and expects silence in return. It's the muscle of neighborliness, of speaking up when rules bend toward profit instead of fairness. It's the muscle that says before an altercation becomes a headline, hold each other accountable. The town moved through the predictable stages, an investigation, a temporary injunction on the cottages, community forums that tried to stitch the wound. Some neighbors filed affidavits. Some neighbors moved. Howard got charged reckless endangerment, unlawful possession, a laundry list that felt small against the landscape of what his actions represented. The HOA was put under scrutiny, which is an ironic little justice. Organizations hide behind bylaws until bylaws become the very thing that drags them into the light. And me? I had people come BYMY mother, sitting with me on the porch, saying things that fixed nothing and mattered anyway. My friends who'd read every line of the old deed and sat with me while the lawyer explained what a title search showed. There were nights I couldn't sleep because the image of that gun barrel had reflexed into every shadow. There were days I felt furious at Howard, yes, but more at the years of small complicities that let him think he could take space and then threaten a life to keep it. The film of that summer is mostly ordinary lawnmowers, lemonade, meetings in the church hall where someone always brought too many cookies. There were moments of grace. The young couple from the third cottage who turned out to be decent people and offered to help with the garden restoration. The hardware store owner who volunteered a weekend to fix the fence on my property without asking questions. The hard part is that good deeds don't cancel out the harm that came before them. They coexist, messy as a backyard after a storm. If there's a final frame I'd like to leave you with, it's a question I ask myself when I wake at 3 a.m. and replay the night like a stubborn song. What would have happened if someone had said, months earlier, "Howard, you're doing it wrong," and meant it? What if being a neighbor meant more than tolerating someone else's appetite for power? That's the question I want comments on because this isn't a courtroom drama with a tidy verdict. It's a neighborhood fallacy. We think silence is harmless until it points a gun. So tell Medone in the comments, where do you stand? Is Howard a villain born of greed or a symptom of a system that buys silence? Was I right to come back and press my claim? Or was there a quieter way to heal this without a confrontation? Have you ever seen an HOA cross a line where the community should have stopped it sooner? Share your stories. Argue with me. Tell me why I'm naive. Tell me why I'm right either way. I want to hear it. If this struck a chord, share it with someone who lives in a small town or a big one. These problems don't care about zip codes. And if you like this kind of deep, messy neighborhood truth, subscribe and stick around. There are more stories waiting on these porches.